All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. This is your morning update on Hurricane Milton on final approach to the Florida coastline, western central Florida, bracing for impact from a major hurricane going into tonight. And across the state of Florida, heavy impacts will be felt through the day today and even into tomorrow as Milton buzzsaws to the center of the state of Florida and moves offshore Thursday afternoon. So we are tracking the latest here this morning. Some developments here in the AM. Overall, Milton is beginning to weaken to some degree. There is some encouraging signs from Hurricane Hunter recon that the pressure is quickly rising inside of the storm. But again, it's coming up from a very low pressure. So this is still a very intense hurricane. A Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale will likely be more towards the Category 3 range by landfall given the current trends. But Milton remains a very strong hurricane and is already producing widespread weather across Florida. A couple of these cells out near Lake Okeechobee have been producing significant tornadoes. We've seen a couple of wedge tornadoes that look fairly strong this morning, and there's also several tornado warning cells inside of this band moving into Cape Coral and up to Sarasota and Bradenton this morning. This severe weather line will generally move to the northeast over the next several hours, and we also have heavy rain, or at least like steady lighter rain, falling across northern Florida today. And some flooding and ponding is already being reported across North Florida and across the state, really, as they're settling in for a very heavy rain and wind event as Milton moves in. So latest National Hurricane Center at 11 a.m., maximum sustained winds, they had it at 145, movement to the northeast at 17 miles per hour. So, the forward motion is interesting because it has been tracking a little bit to the east of expectation, but it is starting to realign itself. This was the kind of Hurricane Center's track, and for a lot of this morning, it tracked off to the east, but it is now corrected and is almost starting to bear a bit north of the track, just slightly. But Hurricane Center locking in right around Longboat Key, it's Bradenton, Sarasota, right about the entrance of the southern part of Tampa Bay for that landfall point. Our hurricane regional models all locking in here as well. But some deviations to the north or to the south are still possible. It will not dramatically change impacts for most people, but it will be very precarious for Tampa Bay. If the storm is able to come in a little bit south of Tampa Bay, right along the center line, then the worst of the winds will be moving out of the bay, and that surge of water will wind up going south into like Port Charlotte, into Naples, into Fort Myers, into Venice, Inglewood. Those areas will get the worst. Bonita Beach. If Milton is able to take a little bit of a more northward jog and kind of comes in on the edge of this cone into more like St. Pete, Clearwater kind of area, then Tampa Bay will experience a catastrophic storm surge from Hurricane Milton. Right now, this is the Hurricane Center's call as far as a reasonable worst case scenario. Again, if Milton does come in more south of Tampa Bay, this 8 to 12 number will go down quite a bit. It will not be nearly that high. But if Milton comes in just north of Tampa Bay, 12 feet is easily going to verify. So, and honestly, it's just too close to call at this point, and it's going to be influenced by a couple of short-term things that we can't fully easily forecast, little mesoscale things that happen as far as where the storm kind of tries to move because it's being pulled by an upper-level weather system. It's moving around a ridge. It's going under these processes and changes. There's so many different variables that, we know that it's going to lock in somewhere right here as far as the core of that hurricane, but where exactly it comes in remains to be seen. Hurricane Hunter recon data right now, Air Force Reserve in there, our TEALs investigating Milton, have seen significant pressure rises. 932 in their first pass, 937 on their second pass. The central pressure of this hurricane is quickly rising, which is good news. Flight level winds have generally been found to be between 115 and 120 knots, one about 110, 115 on the last pass, 120 on the pass before that. They extrapolates to about 140 knots at flight level, which means probably about 120 knots, 115 knots on the surface. And, so about 125 to 130 miles per hour. So probably still trending down from what the Hurricane Center had at 11 a.m., but still remains a powerful hurricane all the same, and is still on that borderline of Category 3 to Category 4. And also, we've seen a pretty significant expansion of the wind field, especially on the south side of the hurricane. And as it undergoes more extratropical processes, notice how all these reds and purples are moving towards that northern lobe. This will rotate around, and where you see these greens and yellows, they will be replaced with reds and purples as the storm continues to expand in all directions. As we noted, Milton is going to grow in size. Looking at the water vapor imagery over here on cyclonic weather, you can see here what's happening is the trough is starting to pull Milton's outer edge more to the north. Notice how much these clouds are expanding to the north, and the storm is being physically pulled to the north and south like you would open a bag of chips. The upper atmosphere is just trying to rip this thing apart and undergo that extra tropical transition we talk about, which is basically an upper level weather system is trying to capture Milton and make it a part of the upper level jet stream and weather pattern. And that causes all that tropical energy to be spread out across more of a distance. So it's going to cause widespread regional flooding. It's going to cause heavy rain and wind and all those things, there. So HFAST-B model shows this pretty well, shows the pressure moving up quite a bit, and then makes landfall right around 950, 960, probably in that 950 range. And again, just south of Tampa Bay is where most of our models have it coming in. I think the HMON is a bit further north. No, HMON's right there. One of these was just a tick further north. I'm trying to remember which one it was. Yeah, the H-Wharf kind of comes into Tampa Bay, which I'm not honestly sure exactly how that would play out for surge. It would probably not be great, but would not maybe be the worst case. It would probably focus the surge right around this area. Definitely a lot of surge coming for this. And I want to go back to this map real quick to point out again that a lot of surge is going to happen well to the south of this. A lot of folks in like Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda that got Charlie and Ian pretty bad, and they're going to think, well, we get those storms and the surge wasn't that bad. You can still get a lot of surge with this one too. So don't discount that surge well to the south. Because again, as Milton's wind field expands to the south, it just picks up more and more water and pushes it towards Florida. And this is a Category 5 hurricane that's already been pushing water for the last 2 days. So again, as we think about this, don't discount the fact that this is a 5 coming back to a 3. It was definitely a different animal than a 1 that like blows up to a 3 or a 4, an hour before landfall. Very different animal at play here. A rainfall is still to come from the Weather Prediction Center. The axis of heaviest rain, it looks like it's going to fall north of Tampa Bay and Melbourne, or right along Tampa Bay and Melbourne, and just to the north, right to about the Ocala National Forest. This is where 8 to 16 inches of rain is forecast to fall, and heavy training rain bands will produce widespread flash flooding. The Weather Prediction Center has their highest guidance out for cities like Orlando and Tampa Bay and the high risk. This is honestly, if the hurricane comes in just south of Tampa Bay and exits just south of the Space Coast, this is where your highest winds are going to be, and this is where your highest rain is going to be in the pink up here to the north. So this is going to be incredibly heavy flooding rainfall, and it's going to be pretty jaw-dropping across central Florida with what people see in terms of freshwater flooding. And then the storm surge just south of the landfall is going to be pretty amazing as well. And then the winds are just going to pile on top of that, bring trees down, cause roof damage. If you're in this immediate area around Tampa Bay or just to the south, you can expect significant damage to homes, to roofs, to buildings. It's going to be nasty when it comes in. Overall for Jacksonville, we've seen generally encouraging news. Before I get to that, though, I do want to mention the tornado threat, something I haven't fully talked about. Again, we talked about big tornadoes, and the biggest threat for tornadoes today is south of Orlando to about that Naples area and this swath north around and north of Lake Okeechobee. But yeah, crosshatch right there. It's very rare. We don't see a lot of crosshatch tornado risk with these hurricanes, but a potential for significant EF2 plus tornadoes is present today across Florida, with Milton mingling with that upper weather system, producing some pretty impressive photographs. Some updraft helicity, things like that are going to be pretty high right here. And as daytime heating continues, you're going to see these renegade supercells that we're already seeing on radar move through there and produce tornadoes. These are all likely producing tornadoes right now, just given the shape of those storms. And those are all moving northward towards parts of central South Florida, Winter Haven and some Land O'Lakes and south of Kissimmee and those kind of areas right there. So that's that. As far as Jacksonville goes, Jacksonville latest National Weather Service briefing, we'll go back to the top here. No major changes to the Jacksonville forecast. I think generally if you're west of I-95, you're going to kind of get a lower end tropical storm, that 39 to 57 range, a few gusts in the 50s. But further west you go in town and further north you go in town, things improve quickly. I think most of southeast Georgia at this point, you're not even going to get a tropical storm out of this. You're not going to get hardly any rain out of this. But if you're along the coast, St. Simon's Island or Fernandina or something like that, you could still see some significant tropical storm-like conditions. The coastline east of I-95 is still going to get battered bad by this storm. It's going to be nasty on the coast. You guys are going to get a lot of wind gusts into the 50s, 60s, and some probably even into the 70s. A hurricane warning is still in effect for parts of southern St. John's, Flagler, and then down towards like southern Marion counties. You know, is definitely the potential for the highest winds are along I-95, and then about Flagler, really southern Putnam, and then like Marion County, where you see that's kind of where the worst of the winds are going to be. And then rainfall threat, heaviest rain still to come down towards Palm Coast and south of Ocala. 8 to 10 inches of rain for Palm Coast, 6 inches possible for parts of Ocala, Balaka, and other areas like that. Rainfall totals look better across Jacksonville itself and towards Clay County, Middleburg. You know, you guys are looking at probably another 2 to 3. I would say these totals maybe are a tick low than I would like to see. But that solar rainfall to come, and just remember that the soil is saturated, lakes are full, ditches are full, drainages are full. You're going to start having like debris everywhere, so storm drains are going to get clogged. It will lead to localized flooding across Jacksonville, and all these counties in the green are still under a flood watch from the National Weather Service, and also for coastal 95 corridor and eastward for South Georgia as well. But largely for most of the area to the north there, impacts pretty light from Milton, just too far north for anything significant, and we are still expecting 3 to 5 feet of water rise for the Atlantic coast and intercoastal waterways, and up to 4 feet inside the St. Johns River Basin. This will be worse than what Helene brought in terms of coastal flooding, I do believe. So please keep that in mind, and just know that, you know, it's still not going to be a picnic across Jacksonville. The worst for you guys will be after midnight tonight and through probably about lunchtime tomorrow, and then most areas will start to see improvement, but the coastline can be battered well into the afternoon. In addition to the rain and the wind and all that, I do want to also mention that the surf and coastal erosion is going to be pretty amazing with this, and especially down towards like Palm Coast and Daytona. It's going to get hammered, guys. Like, it's going to be really nasty in terms of the onshore wind threat and the coastal battering that's going to take place with the surf and the winds and all that combined up. The good news for Jacksonville, though, again, totals for the winds have come down a little bit, and the tornado threat is pretty low for Jacksonville. Flagler County, southern Putnam, and Marion are still under some conditional threat of tornadoes, and then higher towards Daytona and Orlando. But north of probably about, you know, Putnam, St. John's, like St. Augustine and Palatka northward, very limited tornado risk, maybe an isolated one possible, but I don't anticipate a tornado watch for our area, and do not expect much in the way of tornado threats. I think this is going to be more of like a steady rain event at times, and just a pretty rough coastal event for Jacksonville. So that is generally what I got for you guys this morning. Again, very significant hurricane, guys. Please take it seriously. If you're in South Central Florida, it is too late to evacuate, but, you know, long distance, but you can get somewhere safe. If you're anywhere in this area, you know, looking at the storm surge threat for Port Charlotte, for Cape Coral, Bonita Springs, you know, Venice, Sarasota, Inglewood, like if you're anywhere in these areas where you see purple, you've got to get to higher ground. If you're along these corridors here, just get a little bit inland. You don't have to go very far. Get to a shelter. The state has shelters up. You can get free Uber rides to the shelters. This is going to be a rough hurricane when it comes in, even though it is weakening and the trends look, you know, remotely encouraging. It's kind of too late. It's kind of all baked into the cake at this point, and it's going to be nasty. It's going to be the worst hurricane a lot of people have ever experienced in Central Florida. So that's what I got for you guys on your update on Milton. Probably won't have a thing for YouTube tomorrow because Milton will mostly be gone. We might check in on stuff. We'll see how it goes, but I will have updates on Facebook, and we will be checking in on there regularly throughout the landfall of this hurricane and beyond. So that's what I forgot for you guys today on YouTube. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.